My lords, today I'm proud to bring you the winning entry of my writing competition, a tale titled The Divine Gift of Life, written by Sam Steakson. Further details in the description. In the grand halls of the Galactic Senate, representatives from the various empires of the galaxy gathered, each embodying distinct ideologies and beliefs. Grishlor Fixtion, Galactic Senator and Ambassador of the Adrican dynasty, had an incredible view from his position about halfway up the amphitheatre-like seating of the Galactic Senate. The near 24 empires that had joined the galactic community had all contributed to creating a place worthy of the scale of the decisions made here. The galactic community had been formed a mere 30 years ago, a blink of an eye when considering the majesty of the divine creation that all life existed in. It was a majestic chamber nestled within the heart of the cosmos, designed to perfectly make use of the Lagrangian point of a trinary star system near the centre of the galaxy. It emanated an aura of grandeur and enlightenment, particularly when viewed on approach, with the deep black of dark space on the other side, and the unknowable depths of the shroud on the other. Cold light cascaded from the luminous orb suspended above, casting a sharp, ethereal glow upon the scene. It bathed the room in a gentle radiance, adding an otherworldly shimmer to the proceedings. The air hummed with a palpable energy, a vibrant blend of anticipation, deliberation, and diplomatic discourse. Grishlor's hearts were racing. It had only a mere 2 weeks to prepare this presentation, and he already knew it was too late for the Stenian border colony. He was here to deliver a tragedy, and inspire the will of all living things to stand and use their divine gifts given to protect life. It was one thing to hear a tragedy across the galaxy, but he had decided he'd make them watch and listen. Any whom would deny his requests afterwards was truly not worthy of the sacred gift of life. The centre stage, the focal point of the chamber, stood a podium of polished crystalline material. Its translucent surface captured and refracted the very essence of starlight, casting prismatic hues across the floor of the room. From this podium, senators and ambassadors addressed their peers, their voices resonating with authority and conviction. Around the circumference of the Senate, holographic displays flickered to life, projecting celestial maps, statistical data, and real-time feeds from far-flung corners of the galaxy. Holograms danced and swirled, a mesmerizing ballet of information, providing a visual backdrop for the unfolding debates and discussions. In the center was the largest of all the holographic projectors, currently showing a map of the galaxy, with borders and trade lanes all highlighted. The atmosphere within the Senate was both solemn and vibrant, a delicate balance between reverence and spirited discourse. In all truth, the only true downside to this place was seeing other senators give impassioned speeches about imposing minor sanctions on a trade rival. That made his blood boil and his ears contract back to his head. Near the centre of the crystalline podium were the council races, those who either economically, technologically, or militarily were considered the most powerful of the races. They suffered no real mockery or challenges, and constantly bickered over galactic law. Some were adorned with ornate regalia and ceremonial insignias, projecting an aura of authority and control. The other delegates wore garments representing a tapestry of culture and emanated an egalitarian spirit and the strength of unified diversity. But right now, as Grishlor took his appointed time to speak, they would all come to know of events transpiring 30,000 light years away that would leave a stain on the psyche of all living things. It had only been about 2 weeks of warning. The Adrak elemental fleets of wind, fire and water were nowhere in the area. It would be months before they were able to come and relieve the small border colony militia. Great cruiser and battleship fleets, maybe even one of those newest Titan-class cathedral ships, were all off on the Holy Crusade, seeking the death of the Unknowable One, an eldritch monstrosity that would destroy any ships that neared it, and was an affront to the divine order of the universe. Sadly, that meant little to Flight Lieutenant Trinor Wukcha, His Class 2 starfighter was technically top of the line, but even his 16 large squadron could only go so much against a purge fleet from the Bastion protocol. Inertial dampeners made the near-relativistic speed of his craft feel like a gentle shift in gravity. The only noise in his cockpit, the chirping and beeping of various alarms. On his sensors he could see the defense platforms protecting the steel colony stardock carefully aim. The Bastion protocol's first recon fleet was a mere moments away, but at these speeds even a slight miscalculation in their firing trajectory could mean a miss. There was no chatter, no pep talk to inspire the young ones to fight with all they had. The only sound coming through the radio was the soft, solemn prayers from one of his squadmates. It was both a comfort and a somber realization. There was no need to say more. Stian was a middling border colony on the fringes of Adriatic space. The biggest reason it had been colonized was due to the sheer demand for minerals across the Empire. Those who toiled with machinery and mines were blessed by the priests. Frequent luxuries and celestial incentives would be given to the people of this planet to show how even the smallest of the Adriatic was still valued and necessary for the whole. IFF confirmed 47 corvettes of Bastion Protocol design are approaching. Unknown fleet number behind. Defensive platforms have damaged several corvettes. The enemy shows no sign of retreat. The voice of the virtual intelligence of his craft broke through his thoughts. It would only be a matter of minutes now. On the planet's surface, Trinor could easily envision what it looked like. The news was impossible to contain. So the priesthood and leadership had gone to the people and unified them in any way they could. Bunkers, shelters, and a communal space of survival was the only reason the planet hadn't fallen to panicked anarchy. He watched to his left as a swarm of antimatter missiles zigzagged at incredible speeds past his squadron. Yet another firing solution on the approaching exterminators. They'd been firing for 3 days straight, but what was an incredibly effective anti-piracy weapon did little against war machines from a civilization born out of the ashes of their creators. When Trinor had first seen one of the soulless abominations in the news, he was glad to be born amidst people who did not tempt the ire of the true creator. Missiles on target. Impact in 3, 2, 1. Detonation successful. Lead Bastion fleet has taken light damage. 4 corvettes disabled. 43 corvettes armed with the latest in railgun and plasma technology against his squadron of 16 UV laser-equipped starfighters and 9 defense platforms around the starhold near the center of the system. The corvettes were on a direct course with them. At least they weren't going for the planet quite yet, but the main fleet was. Lead corvette entering range, weapon systems activated. Trinor finally keyed on his radio and messaged his squadron. Camdroza squad, take as many of them with you as you can. Tonight, we dine with the ancestors. These machines burning husks as our funeral pyre. Adrex will be done. A warning flash of light on his HUD alerted him that he was being targeted by enemy fire. He yanked on his joystick and pitched hard to the right, while the onboard VI shifted the thrusters of the craft to dodge the incoming railgun fire. He spun his fighter around once the alarm had cleared and aimed at the closest enemy corvette that had approached into his visual range. The range of his lasers was very limited, but at this range, with weapons that were technically low power enough that fine tuning and focusing was possible, shields and armor weren't a problem. The missiles fired from the Starhold were very much the same, able to penetrate shields and armor alike. Combat felt like an eternity, and the 2 seconds it took for the computer to give him a locked tone was excruciating. Once it chirped, he pulled the trigger and watched as the pair of UV laser cannons attached to his craft silently fired. His HUD auto-polarized, limiting the brightness in front of him and preventing him from being blinded. He didn't need to see the damage with his own eyes. Years of training for this position meant he could trust the VI system and kept targeting the soft spots the corvette had. However, being machines, it wasn't as easy as just cracking their hull to expose the crew to space. Trinor focused on the critical components, fuel lines, power conduits, and in particular weapons components. He didn't have to destroy the ship to remove it from the fight. He let the inertia from his ship drift him past the corvette that was significantly larger, making it child's play to hit it from this angle. The lock on target also meant that the VI assisting his control of the ship would have him circle the corvette with emphasis on being outside of its gun's aim, giving him maximum possible damage output while minimizing his exposure. 3 of the other fighters joined him, and between the 4 of them, it wasn't long before the corvette's engines went dead and then stopped firing completely. With its defenses sliced in 2 by dozens of laser blasts, Greenor aimed for the main fuel line and fired. The heat and focused intensity of the laser cut through the corvette's hull like it was butter, and a burst of hot blue flames began to spread. The corvette listed as the thruster from the burning fuel pushed it up, and then into an uncontrollable spiral as the ship tore itself apart. More warnings beeped, and Greenor pitched hard to the left this time, countering his right spin. Another 4 corvettes had entered the fray, and even worse, 2 destroyers had turned to face his squad. Greenor stepped forward to address the Senate. Hush fell over the chamber. His voice resounded with a mix of urgency and solemnity as he began. Esteemed citizens of the galaxy, I come before you now with news of the most foul nature. I have requested this time not only to inform you of the atrocities being committed against my kind, but also to show you what awaits us, without filter, without shame. 20 years ago, my people explored the Epsilon Eridani system. There, on Eridani 4, we found the ashes of divine beings, snuffed out by nuclear firestorm. My people revere the dignity and value of life, and we had planned on rebuilding and creating monuments to the history of the Eridani people on this tomb world. We were 5 years into our mission when they arrived. Greenor raised his voice and then softened into a growl. He needed the galaxy to know this feeling personally. The Bastion Protocol. Some of you have heard of them, fewer still have met them. A race of leftover machines from a despotic people, so cruel and malevolent against the divinity of Almighty that their own creators turned against them. The skies of Eridani 4 burned for months as they systematically eliminated all life on this planet. It was an action they were familiar with. We were not. He motioned up towards the main holographic display. Ever since that day, my people have prepared. Those of you whom we have worked with, you know how we operate. We are fair, we are just, and we will not back down in the face of monstrosities. Even now our fleets of fire, wind and water are en route to rid the galaxy of an existential threat, the unknowable one, who exists partially in our universe and partially in some hellscape beyond our comprehension. This is a gift we give to the galaxy, and we feel it's only right that you, the galactic community, see and experience firsthand the sacrifice my people are forced to make to give you that gift. He clicked the play button on the quantum entanglement communicator that had been linked to the holographic projector. The camera zoomed in slowly on what looked like a mass of stars, but quickly resolved into massive war fleets. 133 corvettes, 44 destroyers, 20 cruisers, and 6 incredibly massive battleships of Bastion Protocol were approaching a garden world with Stellaris floating above it in a virtual nameplate. Tiny in comparison, a fleet of starfighters and the Starhold's missile defense system were a mere fraction of the Bastion's fleet power. A murmur began in the crowd. Greenor let the video play as the Bastion fleet opened fire on the Starhold, and the fighters bravely engaged the Vanguard corvette fleet. While my people fly into the maw of an eldritch abomination, these mechanical tools, these things that are the last sin and remnant of those who would play God, will soon orbit our colony of Stellaris. There are 7 million lives there. All will be extinguished in the coming days. Our border is several jumps away from the Epsilon Eridani system, so this is not a defensive move. They are coming to exterminate us. More murmuring, and now flashes of light, as various ambassadors, envoys and senators began to react to the feed. To the side, one of the council members, a disgusting brute of a being named Dratho from the Acano Science Directorate, called attention. So you pissed off a bunch of rogue warbots. I'm sorry that you've lost that colony, but what exactly do you expect from us? We know of the Bastion Protocol. They're not mindless machines. They would only attack you if they felt that you gave them the opportunity, and you couldn't fight back against them without any effectiveness. We're not here to police the galaxy, nor protect your borders. My expectations are for those of you here today to witness the death of 7 million lives, Grishlaw replied tersely. I want to know who amongst you would stand and ignore this atrocity. I challenge you all to prove to the universe that you indeed are alive and a part of it. Drathlo didn't reply, instead just nodding and watching the screen above him. Grishlaw watched on screen as the fighters from the Starhold were easily swatted out of the sky by so many machines. They desperately shot down a few of the initial Vanguard corvettes, but once the Bastion fleet focused on them, it was over. One after another, the fighters were whittled down by railgun and laser fire. Those brave pilots had trained for years. Most of them, Grishlaw had learned, were former military and had joined the militia to get a better life for them and their families outside of the core systems. He understood why. Not everyone was happy with the strictness of the core worlds, but really wanted to focus on agriculture or building a family in a world with space to grow. The colonists of Stean were part of the backbone of the Empire, and everyone would feel their loss tremendously. Not just in the loss of productivity, but over the past few months, more and more Adrek were showing signs of psionics. Grishlaw was not one of them, but he knew enough that the idea of feeling another's pain would quickly unite many who were irreconcilable before. The camera zoomed in on the last fighter that pulled a spin and fired desperately on the missiles tracking them. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and then a silent burst of light as the 6th missile finally impacted, leaving little but white-hot debris remaining, and then even that stopped glowing and seemed to merge into the dark depths of open space. The rest of the fleets were approaching Stean and spread out, preparing for an efficient orbital bombardment. This time was Grishlaw's, and he made sure it coincided with the actual attack, so none here could not say they didn't know. The Senate was a place of order, and he still had 15 minutes. He needed passion and ambition. The latest projections were that if the Bastion protocol couldn't be checked soon, another 2 colonies, both substantially larger, were at risk. The minutes passed with palpable tension. Several envoys and ambassadors turned on their privacy filters, likely relaying information back to their empires. Grishlaw did everything he could to maintain control, but his eyes watered enough to blink away as the Bastion fleet finally entered orbit of Stean. As he prepared himself to witness the onslaught, the threat recognition software of the holographic projector system picked up a new contact, then another, and then another. Hundreds of new contacts were appearing directly above Stean. They seemed to just appear into existence. No sign of hyperlane activity, nor activation of jump drives. What? Grishlaw muttered to himself. The tension in the air had left, but now was just confusion. The ships above Stean didn't hesitate, however. Beams of energy and bright jets of spatial torpedoes filled the screen. It was clear as day that the Bastion hadn't fired. Whoever this new party was, they were attacking the Bastion fleet. What is this? Grishlaw asked aloud. He watched as dozens of frigate-class ships charged the Bastion. No hesitation, no real tactics or maneuver, just a straight dive and charge, firing torpedoes and what looked like disruptor beams as they closed. Behind them, destroyers with flak and sentinel point defense armaments positioned themselves between the Bastion and the planet, while cruisers engaged with long-range laser, plasma and railgun fire at an angle where they could fire without risking the planet's surface. Most impressive was one large battleship, the distinct bright beam of a particle lance tearing the dark skies of space in twain, as well as a Bastion cruiser that visibly split apart, secondary explosions taking place shortly after. Who is that? Who? Which one of you? Grishlaw had lost all composure, his eyes tearing up and his voice cracked. What holy and blessed people had come to their rescue? The holographic projector finally provided a threat assessment. These were not ordinary vessels. They belonged to another neighbouring empire of the Aradak, the Askrid Service Mesh, an enigmatic race of robots programmed to care for organic life, with no regard for the need of life to have something to work for. Grishlaw felt the universe come to stop around him. As Systematron B5 enacted the Legion node plan instantly, the frigate drone fleet would swoop in and create as much chaos within the ranks of the Bastion as possible. But this wasn't enough. The Bastion were programmed for war and destruction. He might have the superior technology, but it would require precise timing and logistics to win the day. There was no room for error. The organics on the planet below were absolutely helpless against the Bastion, and the Systemon B5 did not want to face the repercussions of failure, even if it cost him his physical being. These abhorrent machines would think twice before harming organics again. B5 received telemetry from all units. His subroutines were focused on those that were engaged or about to be. He spun off a separate subroutine for his destroyers to take defensive position around the planet. Their point defense would be vital in preventing either friendly or hostile fire upon the planet. His cruisers surrounded the destroyers on all sides. This was the bulk of his force, and spreading them out this way in a wall formation meant the Bastion had to break through them to get to the planet. They were armed with the longest range weapons the Asgrid had access to: laser, plasma, railguns, and most importantly, spatial torpedoes. With the frigate fleet tearing into the largest ships of the Bastion fleet, he could focus his cruiser fire on the smaller ships, thus playing to each ship's advantages. And finally, B5's flagship, the battleship, Handshake Protocol, armed with a monstrously powerful lance weapon. The rest of the ship's hardpoints were a mixture of whirlwind and antimatter missiles. His automation protocol for the ship was simple: aim the lance at the biggest target he could reasonably hit, and the missiles acted as a picket against any smaller craft that threatened him. Due to the extreme ranges of the weapons, the ship kept above and behind the main cruiser-destroyer formation. He couldn't understand it. This was impossible. Impossible. Never, in the darkest recesses of his sinful and intrusive thoughts, would he ever have thought this was possible. He looked over to where the Asgrid ambassador was standing completely still in his assigned space. Grishlor had always seen their robotic neighbours as barely above a nightmare. The Asgrid had come to power by creating such an opulent and automated paradise for their creators that they had lost all ambition and drive to live. Life in the Asgrid Empire for an organic was mandatory and excessive pampering. These machines would remove any and all need to do anything except leisure, which the Adric knew could only lead to degenerate and self-destructive behaviour. It was an abomination, and a sheer waste of the raw potential that life gave. They'd become a spacefaring member of the galactic community, with the founding members which also included the Adric. But they were notoriously isolationist, only ever trading to sell their resources for the novelty of new alien consumer goods. Nobody really knew what went on behind their borders, but what scant reports did come through espionage and traders was not anything Grishlor wanted to be a part of. Now he was watching as ship after ship of the Asgrid charged in, sacrificing their own to protect the colony. His mouth went agape, seeing an Astrid corvette pull a turn that would have strained any inertial dampener to its absolute limit, just to intercept a torpedo on its way to the ground, with its own hull, both reduced to fiery atoms. Based on the threat assessment, the Asgrid fleet was the underdog, but they'd come equipped with fast-moving and hard-hitting craft, which were perfect against the large and slow-moving ships in orbit. Confusion had enveloped the Senate as the representatives tried to make sense of this unexpected turn of events. The readings from the skirmish confirmed the identity of these heroes. The Asgrid Service Mesh. Even outside of his own dealings, they were a faction often met with suspicion and mistrust. Nothing about this made any sense. Grishlor was at a loss for words. The Astrid may have had the element of surprise, but the Bastion protocol had the reaction time of a machine. Both sides were taking horrendous casualties. Ship after ship detonated, raining debris that burned upon re-entry like a colossal meteor shower. Finally, Grishlor managed to control himself enough to look down at his computer console. There was a message from the Adric High Priest Council. In a bold notification, it read, "Find out what the Asgrid want." Grishlor took a few seconds to think, and he then held up a hand to get attention. "I am stunned. I have no words that can convey what I feel." He turned to the Asgrid ambassador, who was still standing perfectly still, though quite far away in the room. You. He looked at the screen and saw the asterisks designation was Coadatron 2B, even as he pointed at the thing. Coadatron 2B, Grishlaw hissed, his tone icy and cold to start. Explain. The Asgrid seemed to come alive. His arms began to move up and down, as if testing to make sure they still worked. Without any further hesitation, the machine spoke calmly. We detected the incoming fleet 2 weeks ago. Our forces were cloaked not to arouse suspicion, and have only just arrived. We are grateful that we arrived in time, and regret the loss of your pilots. No further explanation. The sound of a dropped stem bolt on the bottom floor could be heard. Murmuring slowly began again, but Grishlaw wasn't satisfied with that answer. Do you expect me to believe a mere construct of circuitry and code dare to claim an understanding? Dare to intervene in the affairs of the divine life of the universe? The audacity to speak with familiarity? It sickens me. He gestured towards the battle footage playing on the holographic displays, displaying the valiant defense of the Steer colony by the Asgrid fleet. The images portrayed a symphony of destruction, a brutal clash between the Bastion Protocol and the Asgrid, with the latter taking a severe beating to protect the Adric colony. Look at what your kind has wrought, 2B. You have a designation, not a name, a testament to your soulless automation. A reminder that the spark of life, the divinity of organic existence, cannot be replicated by cold, unfeeling machines. Grishlaw's voice resounded with indignation. His words reverberated with the weight of centuries of belief. Organic life is not a commodity. It is not a resource to be exploited or manipulated. It is sacred, an embodiment of the divine essence that flows through the cosmos. It is a tapestry of emotion, of dreams, of aspirations. Can you, with your mechanical mind, truly comprehend such depth? Grishlaw's voice rose to a crescendo. His eyes ablaze with righteous fury. He lashed out, seeing how many within the Senate halls were glued to his words. This was the time. Tell me, 2B, are we to believe that your assistance stems from some benevolent purpose? If you believe you are alive, then you must believe the Bastion are as well. Do you take us for fools, that you would kill those who are like you, to protect those like me? That caused more than a few shouts across the floor. With a few moments to think in clarity, it finally made sense that he went for the heart of his fears. Or is it merely an opportunity for the Asgrid to gather more bio-trophies for your gilded cages of depravity? Are you here to save us, or does saving us include us be added to your collection of controlled organics? The words hung in the air, a challenge hurled with an intensity that could not be ignored. Grishlaw, fueled by raw emotions, awaited 2B's response with a mixture of defiance, confusion, contempt, and hatred. He fell silent, but the Senate began in an uproar. It took the presiding officers of the Senate several minutes to calm the crowd amidst accusations, fear-mongering, and flat-out bigotry against any other. 2B's mechanical visage remained serene throughout it all. The call button requesting the floor on his section was lit, but the machine would not speak until order had been restored. Grishlaw watched it carefully. He could see it moving slightly, probably trying to imitate its organic counterparts to pretend it was not an abomination. Apologies, the machine replied in a staccato voice. We require a few moments to analyze. We do not understand your question. What's hard to understand? Grishlaw replied in a mocking tone. Why? He pointed at the screen, his face wet with dissonant tears of happiness and existential dread. Why? A few more moments of silence, and finally 2B replied in a very matter-of-fact tone. You needed help. The machine let the words linger for a few moments before finishing. What other reason could there be? The response, though devoid of emotion, cut through the air like a blade. It carried with it a simplicity, an innocence that slowly propagated through the rest of the Senate. The large amphitheatre fell into a deathly silence. What? Grishlaw found it hard to reconcile. Your people were threatened with destruction, 2B replied, with what Grishlaw swore was a cautious tone. To not act would be the same as condemning your people, 2B replied. We understand if you wish our combat units to leave your space, and we will do so as soon as the Bastion is defeated. We apologize for the confusion. The Senate, once consumed by Grishlaw's impassioned speech, remained in an uncomfortable silence. On the screen, the Asgrid had reduced the largest of the Bastion Protocol's fleet into molten slag. A mixture of high-intensity plasma, laser fire, and spatial torpedoes had been devastating to their ships. The battle would go on, but it was clear that the Bastion had been checked, and the Asgrid would be able to chase them off, despite their horrific losses. For an organic, the amount of ships and resource lost in this battle would easily have been classified as a tremendous tragedy. No, Grishlaw replied. I cannot believe it. Belief is not required, Uppbeat replied, with a much more automated friendly voice, that accursed customer service voice. Your colony is saved, and we are ready to work jointly with you to eliminate the threat entirely. The Bastion Protocol is a threat to all life in the galaxy. To not act is to condone their actions. Is this not logical? The words hung in the air again, carrying profound simplicity and a core truth. The Adrect ambassador was taken back by the unexpected response. It was a stark reminder that motives need not be complex, that acts of assistance could arise from the most fundamental desire to protect life. He could not reply, not when his mind was a hot mess of confusion. Well, hell, if a walking toaster can come to that conclusion, Rathro cut the silence in his typical grandstanding manner. He stood up and looked to the rest of the council, addressing everyone instead of Grishlaw directly. The Acano Science Directorate doesn't need to see more. We are invoking our emergency powers and bring an emergency vote to the Senate. The lights above each senator's platform shut off, and the Acano and Asgrids immediately turned back on, signifying a positive vote, even before the council member could speak. All in favour of reducing the Bastion Protocol to molten slag and burnt silicon for the good of the galaxy? Grishlaw watched one by one. Ambassadorial platforms began to light up. He couldn't see how many. His eyes were burning. His lungs ached from a desire to cry enraged and yet elated tears. He wiped his eyes and saw Drathlo turn to him and switch to a private line. Don't get the wrong idea, son. Just being pragmatic. Grishlaw didn't care at this point, but seeing that the majority of the Senate were willing to oppose the Bastion Protocol, he held his tongue from what he really wanted to say, and instead at least tried to be polite. Nobody's perfect, but thank you. Thanks for watching, folks, and thank you to Sam Steakson, the winner of the Red King writing event, and to everybody else who took part in it. All details and some of the other stories written by entrants are on my Discord. I encourage you all to check them out if you're interested. Links are in the description. And if you want to hear another story, this time about the origins of the XT489 Eliminators, please click the video on screen now.